Hey guys, welcome back for another video here at Warehouse Amps. Today we're working on a Tech 21 Trademark 10, and we're going to be converting this over to some sort of champ. I haven't decided which one yet, but it'll definitely be a single-ended tube amp. Yeah, I really love these Tech 21 amplifiers. They look cool. They're relatively inexpensive on Marketplace, and I don't know. They come with nice components. I've already started taking this one apart. You can see we've got a nice chassis to work with here. This is the front of it. So the front being like the part up this way. We've got some drill outs for 1/4-inch cables as well as power inlet. So we're going to reuse some of that stuff. Like, this is perfect. It's got a 1 amp fuse in it, so that'll be nice. We're going to reuse the power switch as well. That should be pretty handy. And then here's the faceplate. It's got a few more knobs than we're going to need. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these dip switches over here. 3-position switches. We might do something with that. We might not. Haven't decided. But like I said, we're going to do some sort of champ amplifier in here. Probably not going to put a reverb on it. Not sure if I'm going to do a master volume or not. Seems a little silly for such a tiny little amplifier. You know, if you wanted it to break up, just turn it up louder. Anyway, if this sounds like a fun project to you, then stay tuned and we'll go through the build. So I've decided that the Tech 21 amp is going to be a Vibro Champ. I just had one of these in for a repair and I really liked the way it sounded. So we're going to build one of these inside the amp. We've got a schematic here. I'm going to follow this pretty faithfully. I am going to add one thing to this circuit. See my layout here. I've added a NFB adjustment knob. So the negative feedback, instead of going from the output jack back into the circuit here through that 2.7K or 2700 ohm resistor, it's going to go up to the front to, I think, a 5K pot. We'll see. I may want to have the option to go up to an even higher resistance value here, but I might experiment around with a few different values, and then it'll come back into the circuit here. You can see it'll come under the board, connect back in there. So we're going to bypass this capacitor is just going to go away and be replaced by this knob. Now, I may also somewhere on the faceplate put a NFB cutoff switch. So I'll probably come up here to the switch, have it so you can turn it off, and then if you want to have it on, it'll go to the pot and then be adjustable. Okay, so this is the amplifier that we're going to build inside that little amp. So I've started my layout here. I've got my turret board marked out. I'm going to drill my holes, doing the exact same layout as the Fender, except for instead of using a cap can, I'm going to put all of the filtering capacitors on the board. So just 320s will go right there, and we'll have the resistors just to the right of them over here. Okay. Otherwise, I'm just following this layout for the most part. I've got my chassis marked out here. So this is the front of the cabinet. I just used a Sharpie to mark where the speaker is, so I didn't mount any components here that might come down to the speaker and interfere. I'm going to have my two 12AX7s here, and then my 6V6 will go there. We'll have the rectifier tube here. This will be a cutout for the transformer. This is an IEC power cable and fuse cutout that came on the original amp, so I'm just going to reuse that. I thought about maybe having my filter caps on a separate little board, but changed my mind, and like I said, they're all going to go here. We've got speaker outputs here. We'll have one for the internal speaker and then one for an external speaker. And then we've got our output transformer will go right there. And then the board will mount on the inside with these little standoffs that I use, and I've marked the holes for those. Then any wires that need to pass through can just go through any one of these dozen openings on the bottom here. Right? As far as the faceplate goes, we've got our input jack, and then I'm going to need to make these holes a little bigger because I use 3/8 pots, and these are not quite that big. We'll have a volume, we'll have bass, treble. This will be tremolo, speed, intensity, and then this will be that NFB adjustment. And we'll get a switch mounted in here somewhere, maybe in one of these guys. I haven't quite decided yet. And because none of the terminology is quite lining up here, instead of just keeping it as is, I'm thinking right now I'm just going to paint this whole thing black, and I'll use some of my water slide decals to rename this stuff to what's appropriate. I also have the power switch is going to get reused here, so it's a pretty good one. But then over here, there's an indicator light, and it's 28 volts. So I'm going to try to figure out if I can step down the power coming off here, the main high voltage, and find a resistance value that can bring this down from 315 volts to 28 volts. Not sure if I can do it, but I'm going to give it a shot. My buddy Steve generously donated this cute little drill press to me a little while ago, so I wanted to send a shout out to him for that. I'm using this pretty much exclusively to do my boards now. You can see I've made my holes in here for the circuit. I just, it's got an 1/8 inch drill bit. I just put a piece of wood here on a line and clamp it so that all of the holes line up. That gives it a little bit more professional look. And then there's another line corresponding to the drill bit. So once I get one side done, I just line up the holes with the line here, and then I know that that one will be straight to it. The only variance I've made on this layout versus the Fender layout is here in the tremolo circuit. We've got these 3 capacitors, the 0.02, 0.01, 0.01, that are close together. And so what I've done is I've just moved these points out a little bit. So I've got my 0.02, 0.01, 0.01, and that just gives me a little more space. They're using disc capacitors back when they were building these in the 60s and 70s, and they don't take up as much space as the capacitor that I'm going to use. Just going to need that room there. Also, we've got other components that are tying in and going out, so just a little easier to get the soldering iron in and everything connected up. All right, guys, things have finally quieted down here at the warehouse, so I can shoot a video to get you caught up. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. So I'll just go over a few things section by section to get you all caught up with where I am now. The trickiest part about building this amp was that the layout is sort of like a mirror image of what the Fender layout is. So we have knobs at the front and tubes at the back. Yeah, same thing here. We've got knobs at the front, tubes in the back, but this guy, as you can see, comes straight up off of the green board there. So that's a little bit of a trick. That ends up putting these components in a different orientation than here. So just was a little bit of a mind bender to get it all laid out properly, but I think we're good to go. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over, first we'll do the primary circuit. Here we've got, this is a IEC power block for IEC cable, and it has a fuse built into it. So this was on the original amp. I'm just reusing this. We've got a ground going to this lug here with a bunch of other grounds. And then we've got, this is the hot coming up here to the switch, coming back from the switch to the primary circuit. And then this is the other side of the primary circuit going to neutral, okay? Transformer is now energized. We have two different center taps going to ground here. It's got the filament voltage and the high voltage, okay? I'm using the 325 volt output from here. The schematic calls for 315, but this other option was too low, it's 275. So we're gonna go with that. And then we've got our, I just spaced it, our other power inputs coming in here, the 5 volt, sorry. Output from there is coming over to our filtration rail. We're gonna start with a 40 and then two 20s with these internodal resistors between. The grounds are all linked together underneath and going here to the same lug as all this other stuff. The schematic calls for 20s, all 20s here, but I found that having a 40 in the first position, in the reservoir position, is better for reducing hum than doing 320s. So that's why I'm doing that here, okay? So now we've got B plus power. It's being distributed to the output transformer here, and all of the other connections are made underneath the board, okay? And I'm gonna pause here for a second and we'll flip this around and we'll talk about the audio circuit. All right, so I just flipped this 180 so we can talk about how this audio circuit is wired up. I didn't really make any changes to the Vibro Champ in terms of values for anything. The only two changes that I've made are, I have a switch here that I've installed to lift off the second bypass cap. So that's the second stage of this 12AX7. Now the resistor goes to ground so that the tube is biased, but this bypass cap you can take off by flipping this switch. All right, so that's just a fun little tone thing, and I'll demo that in the audio demonstration. The only other thing I did a little different than I normally do is my ground bus, instead of having it come up and over like I normally do with some wire, is I just have these little loops, these little jumpers going together, because when this control plate is in position, there's not very much clearance, for all of that stuff. So that's why it's wired that way. I just wanted everything to be kind of lower profile. All right, guys, we did it. We got the amp completely wired and everything's functioning. I just did a basic run through, and man, I was having some trouble with the tremolo. It just wasn't working. Everything else was cool, but finally got that happening. And I did that classic thing where it called for a resistor and it was supposed to be a 400K, and I put a 400 ohm in there, and that was right here on the second 12AX7. I was supposed to drop the voltage down, the plate voltage down from 300 something to 100 something. And yeah, if you got the wrong resistor there, go into the plates of the tremolo circuit. It's not going to work if it's got 300 volts on it. So just, take your time, double check that you're putting the right components in the right spot. The other thing I wanted to point out about this layout, and maybe explain a little better visually why this was so confusing at some points, is because it's backwards. Most Fender amps have the power supply over here and the input over here. So your guitar input comes in and it goes through the circuit board kind of in a linear, a right to left fashion if you're looking down at the amplifier, like this schematic here. And you see we have the input come in and it goes right to left. The tubes are laid out in that way, and it ends up over here with the rectifier and the transformer. It all makes sense. This one is just the opposite. So we have the input on the left with our 12AX7s on the left-hand side, and the signal passes through the circuit going left to right this time with our power filtration and power supplies stuff over here. So it was just really throwing me off doing it that way. Getting the volume pots wired correctly was also a challenge, because this whole plate is going to flip up like this and bolt on. So yeah, anyways, it took a little extra time, but well worth it. This amp sounds great. We'll do a audio demonstration here in a little bit, but for now I'm gonna reassemble this chassis and get it into the amp cabinet, final assembly, and then we're gonna take a listen to all the stuff that this amplifier does in just a little bit. I wanted to make sure to mention the two special features on this amplifier that I put in. I can't remember if I did it in another section of the video, so I'll just do it here, and if I don't need it, I won't put it in. We have an NFB loop that's passing through this volume pot and then returns to the circuit. We have a resistor here of 2.7K, which was recommended as part of the circuit originally here, 2.7, to reintroduce that negative feedback into the circuit. So we have a minimum resistance of 2.7. Then by turning up this knob, it's a 1 meg knob, you eliminate the amount of negative feedback that's able to pass back into the circuit until you get all the way to basically nothing coming in, and then it behaves like a much older Fender amplifier that has no negative feedback, okay? And it'll get hairier and distort at a lower volume, have less headroom with that effect, okay? The other thing I added was a switch, and this basically lifts off this filter capacitor here, which is part of the bias for the second cathode in this 12AX7. Okay, so this is a cathode bypass cap, and this switch ungrounds it, so it takes it out of the circuit. And basically what that does is similar to the negative feedback, but has a different tonal quality, and it also drops the volume quite a bit. So it's a little bit more like a cold clip, like in a Marshall amplifier. So if you flip this to the off position, you'll get a volume drop, but you'll have a little more preamp distortion to play with, and then you can just make up for it by turning up the volume. Well guys, that's it. The little Vibro Champ amp is complete. I'm so happy with the way this turned out. I have a couple little cosmetic things to work on before this amp gets sold. There was a faceplate here that said Tech 21, and I don't know why there were 4 screw holes, but anyway, I'm gonna try and figure out a way to either cover these up or fill them in so they're not quite as obvious. The only other thing I'm waiting for is a power indicator light, which is on order, just hasn't arrived yet. And I ended up going with one that is 120 volts, so it'll just tie directly onto the switch. I was gonna try to use the original one from the amplifier that was 28 volts. You can see this guy fit right in there nicely, but I just, I couldn't figure out how to get the voltage drop to work, so that 120 will just be a lot easier. I was able to recycle all the knobs from the original amplifier, and I made my own decals, printed them out, and then stuck them on with a water slide trick. That's my on-off switch for the cathode bypass capacitor, volume and input. And these two holes here there were 3 different slide switches that were in there, and I didn't really think of anything cool to put in those slots, so I'm just going to leave them there to help with a little heat dissipation, just in case we needed more. We have all of these little holes there, so plenty of heat dissipation going on. Yeah, so you've seen the top and the front. Let's take a look at the back. There we go. All of the logo work that was back here, and on top we just sanded off. I went all the way down to 1000 grit and then clear sealed this with lacquer. I think it turned out pretty good. Here's the components hanging down in the back here. You can see how I dropped things on either side of that speaker. You'll remember from the beginning where I had that big Sharpie line. That all worked out really well. I was able to recycle this IEC input and fuse combo. That was super helpful. And of course the speaker, got to recycle that. The tube's a little crooked. Cool, still says Tech 21 on it, but I'm cool with that. If somebody wants to take the time to look in the back door of the amplifier, that'll be fine. And of course the little tiny reverb tank is gone since this amplifier doesn't have any reverb. All right, well, let's spin it around and I'll put the camera on a stand and we'll do a little audio demonstration. All right, we're ready to do the audio test on the Techno Champ, I've decided to call it. It was the Tech 21 turned into a Champ amplifier, so Techno Champ sounded pretty good to me. Got my pilot light installed, pretty psyched about that. And check this out. Oh yeah. So that's just the original faceplate. I just ground off and sanded it down and then printed out a decal that says Techno Champ and put it on there. Looks pretty good, I think. So now we're gonna set up a stand for this camera and we'll pick up a guitar and see what all this little guy can do. All right, we're gonna start off our audio demonstration with the amplifier at about 3. And the tone controls are straight up, no vibrato, regular negative feedback setting, and the cathode bypass cap is on. We'll turn that off later to hear what it sounds like. How about a little more volume? See if we can get a little break up on this guy. So that's just kind of natural break up here. Cool. Turn it back down a little bit and check out the tremolo. Here's medium speed, medium intensity. It's pretty slight. Let's turn up the intensity a little. There we go. Nice. Let's try a little more intensity and a little less speed. There we go. Nice. All right. Let's try adjusting the negative feedback. So here we are with just that regular 2.7K resistor. Remember, as I turn up the knob, the NFB knob, it's going to increase the resistance. So it's sending less and less negative feedback back into the circuit. Here, that's a quarter turn. That's a pretty big difference. Let's go back. Here's the original. Here's a quarter turn. It gets more mid-rangey and a little more distorted. Okay, let's go up to 50%. Even more saturation. plus that 2.7K of resistance. Cool. Now let's check out my cathode bypass. Here's with the cathode in place. Check it out. Is that volume drop? A little different kind of overdrive there, a little different kind of distortion. Because it's happening before the negative feedback loop. So we still have negative feedback to kind of provide overhead and clarity, but we've got a cool little crunch thing happening there. Yeah. There you go. That is the Techno Champ for you. Make sure to like and subscribe this video and this channel so that new videos will automatically appear in your feed. Working on a couple really cool vintage amp repairs right now, and then I'm going to have another scratch build coming your way soon. And I think we're going to do a Marshall circuit this time. It's kind of stretch out. You know, enough of this Fender stuff. Let's try a Marshall. All right, so stay tuned for the next installment of Warehouse Amps. And